Hey riders, Eric Lang with Ride Adventures here. Along with me is Andrew Murray, one of our lead training instructors, brand ambassador, and a guy that's been doing a lot of adventure riding here in the Western US and specifically some of the BDR routes. Thought we would walk through some of the things you've learned on these routes, Andrew.
It's been a great time, but I've definitely learned a few things hitting some of these local BDRs or regional BDRs.
What's the first suggestion or thing you've learned that you think comes to mind?
If someone were going to ask me one tip to keep in mind for riding BDRs or just off-road adventure motorcycle trips, don't overestimate the number of miles that you're going to cover in one day for a couple of reasons. One is that things just happen out there. Right? When it comes to getting fuel, you have to think about where you're going to get it from, and that takes time. The number of miles that you cover, the pace that you're riding at usually is not as fast as you think it's going to be. Navigation becomes an issue. It's easy to either get lost or you want to stop frequently and confirm that you're on the right route. And I think as much as anything is sightseeing. Don't underestimate how many opportunities there are to just stop and look around and check out the view and meet people and things like that. Some people want to just rip it up and go as fast as they can, but a great way to enjoy the BDR or those kind of trips is to just slow it down a little bit.
For sure. Just because you're used to doing a couple hundred miles a day back home doesn't mean you will on a BDR. It's different terrain than you've ever perhaps ridden before, and a lot of things can come up along the way.
Yeah. Last year, I rode the Idaho BDR with two really good riders. They're definitely ride at a faster pace than I do. Even in spite of that, we learned very quickly that a 200-mile day was a really long day. Geez, when we were riding the Idaho BDR, we had every time we got below 4,000 foot elevation, temperatures were in the 90s. So we just had to factor in time to, put on our shorts and take a dip in the river.
Yeah.
It was so hot every time we passed a swimming hole or something like that, we'd stop and take a swim.
Maybe time to filter some more drinking water too.
Yeah.
The next point you mentioned here was packing lighter appropriately for your ride.
I think you need to put some real thought into what you need to bring and what you don't need to bring. The first one that I went on, I really was overpacked. The bike was heavy. I've learned that lightweight luggage, packing light starts with lightweight luggage. I happen to really like the Giant Loop pannier bags, and I also like the Wolfman pannier bags. They're lightweight. They weigh empty 5 pounds instead of 25 pounds, like a pair of hard boxes or even some of the other soft bags. So right there, that's a 20-pound saving.
Yeah.
And that's a lot. I do backpacking and I do bicycle packing, so I've invested a decent amount of money in really high quality, lightweight backpacking level camping gear. So my sleeping bag, my tent is all ultralight stuff. And it gets expensive, but every time you save a pound on one item and you start multiplying that over all the items you bring, if you can shave another 20 or 25 pounds out of your gear, I've just saved 30 or 40 pounds. Yeah, so, a couple things that we did to reduce the weight. We had really two different types of bikes. We had one KTM and two BMWs. We figured out the tools that were necessary for all three bikes, and we just carried one toolkit. We carried one spare front tube in case someone had a sidewall tear and we had to go from tubeless to tube. We carried one cooking unit.
Nice.
And we shared. So, there was several things like that where we saved some weight.
You don't finish a trip or the day and finally look at this stuff that you brought that you never touched anyway that was weighting you down. So yeah. Pre-planning like that, packing light can not add up, but it can really reduce what you're carrying.
For sure. Something that a lot of people don't think about when they plan for a trip like this. Really think about and get to know the people that you're going to ride with. There's personalities involved. There's the style and pace of riding involved. And even, as an example, before we did the Idaho trip, myself and my two friends, we had a couple, and we were all in different locations. One was in Palm Springs, I'm here in Bend, and the other one is in Seattle. So we had a couple of Zoom calls, and We talked about things like what are some particular skills that each one of us had that we're bringing to the table, so we could figure out whether we at least had one person that was pretty good at changing tires. We at least had one person that maybe knew some first aid skills. At least one or two people were experts in navigation. So we knew who was expert at those different important skill sets, and we knew that we had them collectively amongst us. We also convinced ourselves through our calls that we were compatible. We did a little bit of riding together before we did the big trip. We even made some ground rules that no one was going to be left on their own unless they were on pavement. So if we had a disagreement about the route, or there was a section that one person wasn't feeling it and the other two were, that we were going to stick together. Have those conversations well in advance of the trip, so you're not arguing about them, or you're not having a disappointment, or you're not finding out the hard way.
It might be useful in even those small group situations also sort of have a designated ride leader, you think?
You know, I don't think we really sort of had to do that. So I think if we were in a larger group, then having sort of a designated leader, at least giving them certain responsibilities. That was another thing that we did. So we took the Idaho route, which is a pretty long route. I think it's 11 or 1,200 miles. We skipped the first 200 to go through the desert because it was really hot. We broke that route into 3 sections, and each one of us studied that section extensively. All 3 of us knew the whole route collectively and sort of in a general sense, but we each had a section, a 1/3 section of that route that each one of us had studied significantly. We knew the points of interest, we knew the cool places to stop, the fuel stop distances, we knew the towns, and that really helped. It lowered the burden of knowing everything about the entire route, and it gave us an opportunity to sort of point out, you know, features and points of interest all along the route, even some history stuff. So it was, you know, we kind of all learned from each other by doing that.
What did you learn about riding gear and your setup for the?
Yeah, you know, Eric, you've got a great video that you shot several years ago about the convenience or the importance of separating your armor from your outer jacket. And I couldn't agree more with that. We're having these long days on the bike, you know, starting early in the morning and finishing, you know, maybe 5 o'clock or so. I found that, you know, having a separate, I wear like a compression suit. It's got the armor built into it. It stays in place. It's perforated, so it's really lightweight. And then I wear a motocross jersey over that. That worked for probably 80% of the riding, because 80% of the time we were in temperatures from 70 to 95 degrees. And then I took my Gore-Tex Climb jacket. I took the armor out of that. I'd wear that in the mornings when it was 30 degrees until it warmed up to about 50 or 60, or a few times we had some passes where it was raining, and I'd pull that off of the bike and put it on. And then when it got warm again, you know, I would just strap it to the tail bag on my bike. And I was so much more comfortable. When I rode the Washington BDR, I rode it with a friend who was in full Gore-Tex the whole time and didn't have any separate body armor. And our experiences were so different in terms of our ability to just really enjoy the ride.
Late afternoon, he's probably overcooked.
Oh my God, yeah. And anyone that tells you that Gore-Tex Breeze, you know, it's a semi-permeable membrane, but that doesn't mean that it flows air through it. Yeah, wearing a 10-pound Climb Badlands jacket 8 hours a day when you're, you know, sometimes you're going through slow technical terrain, it's 95 degrees out, that doesn't work for me. Having that sort of layer system and that flexibility, and especially to be, you know, have a light, breathable jersey kind of setup for those hot days when you're, you know, not really flowing a lot of air, really important.
And the option to ride protected in hot temperatures and not be so over.
Yeah, and speaking of protection, I don't know why anyone doesn't wear at least something that's sort of like MX level or enduro level footwear.
Yeah.
If you're on a big bike and you're off-road all day long, I mean, it is so easy to just have what they call adventure boots that are soft and flexible. It is so easy to have, you know, even a minor ankle injury that just sort of takes you out of the game.
Foot pegs are pretty hard.
Yeah.
Hitting shins on foot pegs and
yeah, you know, that's another thing. Besides just the protection, the crash protection that you get, you know, you could be standing on the pegs for a few hours a day. And so a really rigid sole boot that doesn't transmit that that pressure of the peg through to your foot. It's just another way to preserve your energy.
So what about from the rider training or skill set background? Anything particular for these rides?
Well, I mean, this is going to sound self-serving as the lead instructor for Ride Adventures, but certainly getting out and getting some adventure bike training. If you're going to ride an adventure bike, getting some skills and training like what we offer at our clinics is a great idea. My caveat to that would be taking a training clinic or class a week before you start a ride like this.
Too soon.
Too soon, for sure. What we teach at our clinics is skills to manage the bike, fundamental skills. So then go out and practice those skills, practice them until it's fun.
Yeah.
And that's gonna serve you a lot better than, we've had some students that have shown up and they're taking our training on Saturday and Sunday, and on Monday they're leaving on the Oregon BDR, and I guess they're probably gonna be better off because they took some training than if they hadn't done any at all, but that's kind of a compression of the time frame that probably makes the most sense.
Yeah, it's quite the training courses are generally an exertion of physical energy and demand. Don't put that right before your trip.
Yeah.
Hopefully get it a couple months in advance and practice.
Yeah, and our friend Dork on the Road makes a really good point about these kind of trips is go out in your backyard and set up your tent and sleep in your tent and your sleeping bag one night. Throw all the gear on the bike and take a 40-mile ride to a campground or anything that's convenient to go camp, and just camp one night.
Don't wait until you're away from home on the road in the middle of nowhere somewhere, finding out that something's missing or something doesn't fit or something doesn't work.
Yeah, something has fallen off the bike or the way that you've packed your gear doesn't quite work out. So a little bit of practice goes a long ways.
How about navigation on these routes?
Yeah, so I mean, certainly, navigation is super important. I think most people that are considering doing a BDR or a big ride like this, they know they need to have some kind of GPS system. I would say having a dedicated unit is probably preferable to relying just on your phone. Phones have limited battery life, they can fall and break. So, I use a Zumo, a Garmin Zumo XT. There's other units that are great. But I think another important component about navigation is don't rely or don't put all the burden of navigating for your group just on one person. Whatever group you're riding with, whether it's a small 2, 3, or 5 people, there's probably one person that's probably a better navigator than most everyone else. But everyone in the group needs to understand the route. They need to know the route. They need to have it downloaded onto whatever units they're carrying. Putting all of that burden on one person is, for one thing, it's not really fair to that individual. It's a lot of extra work. And that one individual, sometimes there's people that they just want to be in charge of the navigation. But really, everyone in the group should understand the route, should know the route, should know how to change the route if you have to find an alternate. I guess my learning on that, my suggestion on that is, if you're doing one of these routes and it's new to you and you're riding with someone that's more experienced or has more experience with navigation, do everything you can to sort of bone up your skills on navigating. Don't show up for the ride with your Garmin Zumo still in the box, still in the package, and you're busy installing it or reading the instruction sheet. Learn how to use that unit, learn how to use the apps that you're going to use on your phone, learn how to download the GPXs. That great navigator in your group, his bike might break on the first day,
he could get
and
hurt,
he's not, or he gets
whatever.
he could get hurt, and all of a sudden he's not with you. And so do you really want to, throw the whole trip down the drain because one person, the best navigator, dropped out?
Yeah. And having that backup plan off the route that you think you're going, like downloading maps beyond just the sort of sliver.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because most of these units, if you download a route, it really just downloads the terrain relative to the route. If you have to deviate from the route because there's a closure or there's snow or whatever else, having more landscape downloaded into whatever whether it's your phone or whether it's your Garmin or both, and a paper map with a compass
backup,
is really helpful, because then you can deviate from the route.
What about fuel management?
Yeah, you know what? A, B, F. A always. B, B, F, fueling. Always be fueling. And coffee's for closers.
That's right. Alec Baldwin here with me. Did I say Andrew Murray? I meant Alec. But yeah, good point, because you never know when
You never know.
Is that fuel station still going to be open?
When we did the Idaho BDR, half of our fuel came out of steel cans from behind like a saloon or a bar or a cabin or something.
Remote places by nature, that's what these routes are meant to do.
And a lot of these places, they run out of fuel, so like I said, always be fueling.
Stay on the upper half of the fuel tank. Don't ever run it down just because you want your bike to be lighter or something like that. So anyway, hope that list of things Andrew's learned and others probably as well have learned from riding these routes around the U.S. and other places in the world. So if you have questions, leave them in the comments below.
And I'd love to hear any tips that you've learned, unusual things you've learned from riding these kind of rides. Put them in the comments. Love to hear them.
Yeah, thanks for joining me, Andrew.
Thank you, Eric.
Good to see you all. Ride on. We'll see you soon.